Hello Tone Chasers, I'm Robert and welcome back to Tone Chase Basement. In today's episode we'll try to demystify the legendary guitar tones of one of my own guitar heroes, but before we do that, if you're passionate about guitar tones, please hit that subscribe button and join us in this sonic journey. Today's episode is very special for me because we are diving into the evolving sounds of none other than John Frusciante. Well, for me, and I'm sure that for many of you, he is undoubtedly one of the best guitarists of our time and a major influence and one of the main reasons that I picked up the guitar in the first place. John's guitar sound has metamorphosed through the years, from the raw energy of the Mother's Milk and Blood Sugar Sex Magic era, to the more melodicness of Californication and By the Way, to the more refined sounds of Stadium Arcadium and the Unlimited Love Times. Each era brought a different flavor of amps and pedals, yet some constants remained. His love for vintage Stratocasters, Marshall amps, and an array of unique pedals that sculptured his sound. Before we get into the specifics, let's acknowledge John's massive influence. His approach to melody, rhythm and dynamics makes him a true innovator, and his sound isn't just about gear, it's about expressing the soul through 6 strings. Today's quest isn't about replicating his exact setup because there are already tons of videos on YouTube for that. It's about capturing the essence of Frusciante's tone with whatever gear you have. We'll explore his clean, crunch, distortion and modulation sounds, breaking down each with practical examples. But before we start, please keep in mind that even though you had the same gear as he does, it's pretty impossible to sound exactly like him. You can get pretty close and similar, but you don't have to have the same gear. You can get there with similar or any other gear as long as you dial it in correctly and combine your gear correctly, and as long as you play the correct notes. We will start with his clean sound, of course, which is actually never really clean. It's always dialed just below the edge of breakup, so it has a kind of crunchiness and dirtiness to it, but still retaining that warmness and richness of a clean sound. John is known to use a variety of Marshall amps. For live situations he uses a Silver Jubilee and a Marshall Major, but for his studio work he's also been using some Plexis and GCM 800s. So if your setup includes a Marshall, it's safe to say that you can get into the same ballpark easily. It's all about finding that sweet spot where your amp's natural voice meets subtle enhancements. So once you found that sweet spot on the 3 EQ knobs, then try to add a little bit more of middle to it, because John's sound is a little mid-heavy. Dial the bass a little bit back and try to add the correct amount of bitiness with the treble. About the preamp gain, just don't turn it up all the way, where it's all dirty and gritty, but find that middle ground just below the edge of breakup, where it's still clean, but still has an edge to it. Also with the master volume, it's always nice to turn it up, of course, to the point where you feel that the power amps just start to saturate and compress and push the speaker how it should be. John is also known to use a clean boost for his clean sound, to hit the front of the amp a little harder to get a fuller, warmer tube sound out of it. But if you don't have a boost pedal, then I can show you a trick how I do it on my GCM 2000. So all you have to do is just jump the FX loop with a patch cable, just put one side of the cable into the FX end and the other side to the FX return. What you achieve by it is that because when you use an external effect in the FX loop, you send the signal out with +4 decibels to compensate for the signal loss, and once it returns, it will be around on the same unity level. But now, because here are no effects, then you just connect directly the preamp to the power amp, and the +4 decibels hit directly the power amp, which makes the power tube saturate even more, which makes and gives you a warmer and fuller sound. And of course, if you have a foot switch for the FX loop in your amp, then of course this trick turns your foot switch into a clean boost pedal. Okay, now let's try to dial in the Frusciante clean sound on the Fender-like amp, and for that I will be using my Fender Hot Rod Deluxe. The goal here is to prioritize clarity and headroom, and with this amp I like to use the bright switch on because it just adds more chime to it, and that's also a characteristic of the recognizable Frusciante clean sound. And these Fender-like amps already sound scooped, so don't be afraid to turn that middle EQ knob all the way up to add that full bodiness to it. Don't add too much treble because they are already a little ice picky, and just dial the bass correctly according to your guitar. Well, not bad, but it's still far away. This amp sounds way too clean for that Frusciante sound, and what I like to use with this amp is a kind of an always-on pedal, which colors this amp and makes it sound more like a Marshall with warmer mids and a little bit more bite to it. So something that I like to use for it, for example, is the Marshall Bluesbreaker pedal, and I set it just the right amount of gain just to add a little bit more warmth and grit to it, or something like the Fulltone OCD, also in the LP mode with the drive set to pretty low, just to color the sound and add that Marshall-esque character to it. There is also one very important thing to John's clean sound, and it is that he uses the Boss SE1 chorus pedal. And even though the chorus is not always on, there is a built-in preamp into it which is always on and you cannot bypass it. So his clean sound is always affected by that, and that's somehow become his signature clean sound through this preamp, which adds a little more dirt and crunchiness to that clean sound. I don't have the SE1, of course, but I have a copy of it by PastFX. The first level control is that preamp, and you can switch it from high to low peak modes. You just fine-tune it correctly to find the right amount of crunch. Now let's talk about compression, which is the second unsung hero of John Frusciante's clean sound. A good compressor can of course smoothen out the dynamics and then add sustain and bring you closer to that under the bridge kind of sound. Of course, it can serve as a clean boost to push your amp subtly. John generally uses an MXR Dynacomp, but any other compressor pedal will serve for the purpose. I have the Origin Cali 76, which is a more subtle sounding compressor, and it will just work fine for this purpose as well. Now let's talk about John's crunch sound and how to achieve it with some overdrive pedals. Well, John's crunch tone is articulate but with a bite. It's not about maxing out the gain knob on the pedals, it's more about finding a more balanced sound with the level and the tone controls. And I will give you some examples with some drive pedals how you can achieve it. For example, the Fulltone OCD, which is, I think, in my opinion, a very good pedal to achieve his crunch tone, and also the Boss SD1, which he generally likes to use on his latest tour, and of course the Ibanez Tube Screamer, which he also used in the past. Well, now comes a very important part, how to achieve John's signature sound, and it's about his distortion sounds. Well, if there would be such a thing as a John Frusciante signature pedal, then I would definitely say that it's none other than the good old Boss DS2 pedal, because this pedal is present on his pedal board since he joined the Chili Peppers, and up till today this pedal never left his board, and he uses it still today in almost every song he plays. So the way he uses this pedal is that he uses the turbo mode only, because it's a very mid-heavy and mid-honky tone, and it just cuts through the mix, and that is his actual signature distortion sound. He uses all the three knobs maxed out, and so the level, the tone, and the distortion knobs are turned all the way up, and once you hit on this pedal, your guitar just turns into a screaming monster with that punchy, articulate distortion sound. So if you are after his actual distortion sound, then I really recommend this pedal, because first of all, it's a cheap pedal. It's one of the cheapest pedals on the market, and it's very accessible. You can buy it anywhere. Of course, it can work in other situations as well, so not just for his sound, but of course, this is one of the most important gear that you need to have if you are after his sound. Of course, you don't have to own the DS2. While the DS2 is the key for his actual distortion sound, there are many other distortion pedals that you can use and get close to his sound. One of them is the Big Muff, which is actually a fuzz pedal, and he also likes to use Big Muff pedals in live situations, and he combines them as well with the DS2 together for that colossal sound and infinite sustain. So of course there are different editions of Big Muff pedals, so there is the actual Big Muff, then there is the Little Big Muff, the Nano Muff, and other Big Muff editions. I've got here the Ram's Head edition, and you can't go wrong with any of these pedals. If you dial it in correctly, then of course you can get pretty close to his fuzz sound as well. In my opinion, there is also another type of distortion pedal that works great for his sound if you don't own any of the DS2 and the big muffs, and it is actually somewhere between the distortion and the fuzz pedals. It is the Procorette type of distortion pedal. I don't have the Procorette, but I have a pedal that is based on that circuit, and that is the 1981 drive pedal. There are many of those Procorette type pedals out there, so any of them would work as long as you set the drive, the gain knob pretty high and cut the frequencies up to the point where it's not too harsh but still has that mid pushiness, and of course set the level to unity. So it looks like there cannot be any videos on YouTube today where they don't mention a KLON. Well, of course, this is not a distortion pedal, it's an overdrive pedal. Or is it? Well, technically speaking, an overdrive pedal has soft clipping diodes in it, but a KLON has hard clipping diodes in it, which technically makes it a distortion pedal. So I said, why not try it? And actually, it's not that bad for that Frusciante tone. Why? Well, because a KLON has a pretty mid-heavy character, which is good for the Frusciante distortion sound. And if you turn up the gain knob on a KLON type of pedal, then it won't blend any of your clean guitar signal into the sound. It will just go straight through the hard clipping diodes on max gain, and there will be a distortion sound. And you can use any KLON pedal for this because they all sound the same. Yes, they all sound almost the same. And I have the Wampler Tumnus here, but any of them will be good. And of course, if you don't have a distortion or drive pedal, then an amp distortion will do just fine as well, as long as you turn the gain knob pretty much high and turn the middle knob all the way up, dial in the treble and the bass correctly, and you're good to go. Okay, now let's swim into some reverb. Well, reverb is essential for his sound, but John uses it only with a light touch for ambience. And as long as you have a spring reverb in your amp, for example, or any reverb pedal with a spring hole or a plate setting on it, just add a little bit of it, just to add a little space to your sound without the muddiness. Delay. Well, delay is another effect that John brings into his sound, often during solos to add dimension, but also for some other song parts just to add more depth and space to it. We'll look at various delay types. I'll show you some examples with analog tape and digital delays. Any of them will work fine, just don't overuse it so it won't step over your playing. Chorus is a defining feature in John's clean tone. It's about creating width and movement in the sound, and he likes to use it very much in live situations for his clean tone. Well, as I mentioned before, he uses the Boss CE-1 with the built-in preamp in it, but of course you can achieve a similar sound with any other chorus pedals that you might have, like the Boss CE2 or the MXR analog chorus or the Walrus Julia or any other chorus pedals. As long as you set the depth pretty much all the way up and the rate pretty slow, then you're good to go. There's also an interesting effect that John likes to use lately, and it is kind of a vibrato or a rotary sound, which became a signature of John's palette since the By the Way era. And I will demonstrate here a couple of examples how to achieve this sound with some chorus or vibrato pedals, and even with a phaser pedal dialed all the way up. Mentioning the phaser, well, the good old MXR Phase 90 is on his pedal board, but any other phaser pedals, he doesn't use it pretty often, just for some song parts, but it can come in handy. And last but not least, there is, of course, the wah-wah. Well, as I mentioned before, for the DS2 that it should be John's signature pedal. If there should be a second signature pedal for him, that would be the Ibanez WH10 wah-wah pedal, because in combination with this DS2 pedal, that is his iconic and most recognizable guitar sound. Why he actually likes to use this wah pedal is because it has a deep curved EQ filter in it, and it sounds so smooth and it's very easy to control. Of course, you can get pretty close with any other wah pedal as well, such as the Dunlop Crybaby, if you use it and control it with your foot correctly. And of course, with something like this Xotic FX wah pedal, which has a variety of settings here where you can set the filter EQ or the treble and the bass response. So we've journeyed through John Frusciante's soundscape, proving that it's not just the gear, it's how you use it. Remember, it's not about exact replication, it's about channeling the spirit of Frusciante's sound through your fingers and your gear. It's about music, the emotion, and connecting with your audience. Get close to John's sound, but make it your own. If you enjoyed this sonic adventure, please like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Please let me know your thoughts or if I left out something in the comments below. Your support fuels this channel, and keep chasing those tones, and I'll see you in the next video. And remember, the perfect tone is always just within reach.